the price is going to go crazy because one, it's a fixed supply and it is known. And then two, the buying power is going to be a metric that is a derivative off of human productivity. Bitcoin is a paradigm shift, and like concerns around like, is Bitcoin a medium exchange? Is Bitcoin going to be a unit of account? Like these concerns are really just a symptom of us being in the extreme early adopter phase. How many dollars are there, Robin? Not even Jerome Powell knows. So the high priests of fiat don't know how many dollars there are. Anyone can tell you how many Bitcoin there are. Bitcoin is money you can count. It's already exponentially better. Don't worry about it. Like either Bitcoin's gonna work or you're gonna need to find another solution. But like some effort we take is not gonna change the destination of Bitcoin. I think no one is bullish enough. No one's bullish enough, so we can talk about that.
Yeah, I love that a lot. Before we get started with the topics, maybe for the few people that don't know you, who are you and why are you excited about Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a Bitcoin enthusiast. I've been in the space since late 2017, and I dove in head first. I discovered Bitcoin late 2017. Became a Bitcoin maximalist in like 3 months. Thankfully, there was some really good content creators back then who were, preaching sanity. And I was lucky enough to meet the folks at BTC Inc. In early 2018, January 2018. And I had already quit my fiat sales job, and I, started shaking hands. And I told them, I live in San Francisco, I do sales, and I love Bitcoin. And a month later, I had a job at BTC Inc. So I made my name at BTC Inc., helping build Bitcoin Magazine and the Bitcoin Conference. And I've been really active in the Bitcoin space for a long time, I guess since 2018. And in 2023, after 5.5 years at BTC Inc., I moved over to the Human Rights Foundation to help them build out their Bitcoin program. So many people in Bitcoin know about the Human Rights Foundation. It's one of the nonprofits, most active nonprofits in the Bitcoin space. HRF is actually a very, very cutting edge and technology forward human rights organization. So we've always embraced technology, and we actually are creating this kind of timeline of how early we were to Bitcoin. But the reality is like we used Bitcoin to send funds to Ukraine in 2014, which is like super, super early given that Bitcoin was invented in 2009. And I think that we back that up by, we're a leader in Bitcoin giving in Bitcoin, as well as supporting open source Bitcoin development. And we're very active in the overall Bitcoin ecosystem. So I think I'm just super lucky, man. I got to, skip the shit coining, go straight to a great Bitcoin only organization, make an impact in Bitcoin. And now, I'm helping the Bitcoin ecosystem grow at HRF. So I'm just the luckiest guy.
Awesome. And you quit your fiat job before you joined Bitcoin Inc. It's like, you're just like, yeah. I get out of that and I want to find something new.
Yeah, no, I couldn't wait. Actually, if you look at, I quit my job 2 weeks before Christmas in 2017. And if you look at the chart, that is like within 3 days of the top. So I legitimately quit my job at the top to go into Bitcoin full time. And I'm lucky that it worked out, because it doesn't always work out for people. Actually, I think the more common story is that you quit your fiat job, regret it, and then get another fiat job.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. So you quitting the job was the top signal.
Definitely a huge top signal, but I'm still a lucky winner.
So the top is not in yet because you're still working now.
Yeah, I'm still working. Yeah, but I'm not planning on quitting my job based on fiat wealth or Bitcoin wealth. These days, I feel very mission aligned.
Absolutely, I can imagine it. You have one thing, and I love that you put it in the bio, and we talked about it before. Nobody is bullish enough, and I had the concept brought up in the podcast 1-2 times. But what do you mean by that, and why do you do it so? Why do you keep it so popular on your bio?
Well, first of all, if you understand the potential of Bitcoin, then you understand that if it works, where we're going, our monkey brains can't understand that. So I just think it's actually the easiest win ever, right? Like, I can't believe that Bitcoiners are just giving me this. I can be the no one is bullish enough guy, when it's actually like the easiest thing ever to say about Bitcoin. And I guess let me just explain it. If you think about Bitcoin in terms of outcomes, I think you can boil it down to 3 logical outcomes. And I've talked about this on a lot of podcasts. But those logical outcomes are Bitcoin fails, Bitcoin is just another asset, which is the current status quo. We live in a world of assets. Bitcoin's just another asset. Or Bitcoin is the denominator. Bitcoin is what we say it is. It's a paradigm shift, if you will, in monetary technology. And the world shifts from a chaotic fiat system to an intelligent Bitcoin system. Like that is like paradigm number 3. So if you think about what our predictions need to be based off of, it's either those 3 outcomes, right? It doesn't really make sense to think about, to say, I believe in hyper Bitcoinization and then predict like $1 million Bitcoin in 100 years. Like those things don't mix. It's either I believe Bitcoin is just another asset, and then there's a whole host of questions and things that you need to consider if like that is the long-term implications of what Bitcoin is. Like, does the security budget make sense if Bitcoin is just an asset and it's going to be only used by a niche group, or it's going to be financialized and abstracted away? Yeah, I mean, those might be legitimate questions, but security budget questions and price questions, if hyper Bitcoinization happens, if Bitcoin becomes the denominator, like those are stupid questions. Like, why even freaking consider that? Like, of course, there's going to be plenty of security budget. It doesn't matter if the block reward splits in half every 4 years, because the price only has to outpace that, and it will continue to pay out the security budget. Like, that's really easy logic to think through. Okay, well, if Bitcoin becomes the denominator, then price should more than outpace, the halving schedule. And if Bitcoin does become the denominator, then there should be insanely high fees to use the base network, because all economic activity is at some point settling on the base network. So like these things aren't going to be a problem. So why am I talking about all these things? Well, I think that scenario number 3 is the most likely. And if Bitcoin truly is a paradigm shift, then no one in the other paradigm can be optimistic enough about the new paradigm. And that's a fact, because none of us are smart enough to think about what is possible when the impossible is possible. That's what new paradigms do, right? So let me give you an example about a paradigm shift that's happened in the past. Okay, well, you could argue that electricity was a paradigm shift. Okay, well, in the world before electricity, there's lots of FUD about what electrification would look like. So like there's a lot of fear. There's like this propaganda of like people being electrocuted on their horse, and all this kind of crazy stuff. But no one really realized that electricity existing equaled open heart surgery, that electricity existing equaled going to the moon, that electricity existing equaled international communication networks and the internet, and me and you being able to do this call over, in real time when we're geographically in completely different places. No one was bullish enough on electricity. Maybe Nikola Tesla, but that was just one. Okay, here's another example of a paradigm shift. Another example of a paradigm shift is antibiotics being invented. Well, I don't know if you know this, antibiotics, very, very important medical tool. Well, prior to antibiotic, lots of bacterial related diseases killed people. Doing surgeries was very difficult because it was difficult to have a sterile enough environment to, cut the body open. Do surgeries is much, much more risky. And on top of that, when, the current, like the medical establishment at the time rejected antibiotics. They're like, this is snake oil. Like, this is not going to work. Like, this doesn't do anything. And shortly after, now like the term panacea means it solves everything. Panacea was the first antibiotic that was really like introduced into the market. So it shows that like, okay, one, if it is a paradigm shift, it's going to be rejected by the experts. Two, if it is a paradigm shift, it's going to unlock a world of possibilities that were not possible before. And then 3, people living in the old paradigm will not be able to understand what the new paradigm is going to like what the implications of the new paradigm is going to bring. So now like, let's apply that to Bitcoin. Okay, well, if Bitcoin fails, it fails. If Bitcoin's is just another asset, which is the status quo, this doesn't apply to that. But if Bitcoin is a paradigm shift in monetary communication and monetary medium and how the world works and how value is stored. If Bitcoin demonetizes gold, demonetizes real estate, all of these things that Bitcoin maximalists say it will do, then what that means is that no one understands what that is going to unlock in the future, and no one can be bullish enough on what that is going to look like. And then so if we apply that to Bitcoin economics and Bitcoin price and all that stuff, like it should make your brain explode. But like no one's talking about it that way today still. Maybe Jeff Booth. There's a few people that are like kind of talking about it like this, but very few people are talking about it like this. People are usually talking about it in the frame of Bitcoin's another asset. And we're going to talk about it denominated in USD. And we're going to talk about it in projections into the future and all this kind of like things that are much more focused around not Bitcoin a paradigm shift, but Bitcoin in the current status quo. So I know that was a big rambling. I know that you want to jump in. But yeah, that's why I think no one is bullish enough.
There's a lot of really interesting things in it that I want to go off. But I do agree. Like, I think even a lot of Bitcoiners are not bullish enough, especially long term. They sometimes overestimate what we can do in the short term. Like, we are going to 1 million this year. Like, I don't know if this actually happens. But then they underestimate in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years, what the potential of Bitcoin really is, and what the total addressable market for me is in Bitcoin not even capped, because maybe we discover other planets, maybe aliens come, maybe I don't know, like AI bots are all using Bitcoin. This just like triples and quadruples the whole market.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of ways that if Bitcoin is a paradigm shift, that the price is going to go crazy because one, it's a fixed supply and it is known, and then two, it is going to, like, the buying power is going to be a metric that is a derivative off of human productivity, right? So if human productivity in 100 years is 1,000x on what is possible today, like, how do you price that in today in Bitcoin terms? It's really hard to do that. And what I'm saying is it's actually not crazy talk. Like, let's just go backwards 95 years. We can do that. We can think about what the world was like. Okay, how many people then could have thought about what is possible today and what the actual productivity of the humanity is going to be like today? I don't think anyone. No one 95 years ago was able to project the future productivity, let alone like with Bitcoin as like a new kind of piece into that puzzle.
Absolutely. It's also interesting, actually, I'm wondering a lot about that, why the status quo never sees a paradigm shift happening. And there's like with electricity, but maybe let's take a fun, more recent example with Steve Ballmer. I think he was CEO at that time of Microsoft. And this clip, you probably have seen it. It's a very famous clip where he's laughing at the iPhone, of the introduction of the iPhone. Who is paying like $500 for like a phone that doesn't even have a keyboard, something like that, he said. And I'm always like really mind blown how the incumbent system that should have the most information about an industry doesn't see the most significant change of that very industry. That always just like completely blows my mind how people don't see that.
I call that proof of paradigm shift. Like, it's not a paradigm shift unless the incumbents can't see it. And the reality is it's very, very hard to disrupt yourself. And that was really well characterized in a famous book called in a famous concept called the Innovator's Dilemma, which is like at some point you have reached the top of the pyramid, and then it's difficult to innovate, because then you would actually have to attack your own business model. Right, you'd have to disrupt your own business model. So that's the innovator's dilemma. Is like, if your innovation works, eventually you get to the point where you have to innovate against yourself, and you can't. And that's where a new upstart comes. So if you don't see the denial, if you don't see the disrespect from the existing incumbents, it's actually a good sign that it's not that much of a paradigm shift. Maybe the only example in my memory that is kind of counter to that is like LLMs and AI, but maybe we're just later on the adoption cycle of that, and that started much earlier. And like people think like, oh, like ChatGPT, like AI, like everyone accepts that this is going to change the game. Like we like that can still be Bitcoin maybe in 10 years, right? Maybe like it will become ubiquitous that Bitcoin is what we all think it is going to be in 10 years. There was a period in even the LLM like cycle where like it was only really the cutting edge like AI researchers who were like, this is going to be something, like there's something here. So yeah, I would actually say like, yeah, like without the doubt, like it's not going to be a paradigm shift. Without the denial from the existing, it's not going to be a paradigm shift. It's almost like proof of paradigm.
There was this fun moment with Elon Musk and Jack Ma, I think was the name, the Alibaba founder, who were asked on stage, and Jack Ma said basically, "Oh no, I think AI will never be more intelligent than any human being." And Elon Musk next to him just laughed at him. That was fun. Maybe that's like one example how someone that actually should get technology and those things obviously underestimated AI. But it's interesting with this innovator's dilemma. Do you think there might be another innovation to money outside of Bitcoin? I don't know, like thousands of years down the road. I mean, impossible to look forward, but do you think Bitcoin might be the final money?
It doesn't have to be. I think that we should always have the door should always be open for real innovation that disrupts Bitcoin. But I just don't see that in the altcoin ecosystem today. And I don't see that, I don't see that emerging out of the fiat world. Like, I think like if that does emerge, it's actually out of like the post hyper Bitcoinization world, right? Where it's like, okay, it's going to be Bitcoin, building off of Bitcoin, there's going to be another unlock and maybe we have another way. If we become multiplanetary, there's a lot of arguments to say that like, from a physics perspective, the way that Bitcoin is designed, like it can only really work in a sovereign way, within Earth's orbit, unless the center of hash moves, right? So like, it's kind of crazy to think about like what happens if most of the mining is not even happening on Earth. Like we're very far away from that. And we're very far away from things improving on Bitcoin as sound money in the digital age. But yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the current ecosystem, it's Bitcoin. Like there's nothing else to take super seriously. And I came to that conclusion really fast on my end. Like some people like go through their own like Bitcoin crypto shitcoin journey. Like for me, it was like crypto. I started researching, Bitcoin maximalism. Like it was like, that's the logical interpretation of what's happening here. So I came to that conclusion really fast myself.
There's one guy, because you just mentioned it, that I think till now was for me the most bullish one on my show. He said one Satoshi will buy you a spaceship. And, and he had this crazy theory that Bitcoin mining will actually, get 99 point whatever percent of all the energy consumed, because we will have so much abundant energy that the only logical thing is to put it somewhere where it's useful outside of the thing we're already using it for. And he had the theory that we build solar panels around Mercury to capture the energy of the sun and do it. It's mind bending, those ideas.
Yeah, look, science fiction is probably the only place where people like grokked where we're going. So I'm sure science fiction is where the creativity that's going to inspire the future is going to emerge in the future. Gosh, that was probably a really weird statement. Yeah, in terms of like the most bullish way that I can think of articulating the future is once that equals a spaceship, that's more bullish than me. What I've been saying is I've anchored to the block reward in 95 years as that's 37 sats. And I've been saying 37 sats is going to be generational wealth based off of the assumption that we will be able to have more energy and more hashes than we can comprehend in 95 years. And if it is used to capture those 37 sats, that in today's terms, 37 sats will be generational wealth.
Oh gosh, I love that. You're definitely more bullish than me. I have to work on that.
And well, look. What I would say is, Robin, is like Bitcoin's either a failure, the status quo, or a paradigm shift. If it's a paradigm shift, it's not crazy talk to say in 95 years everything will be different. that's actually the logical way to assume a paradigm shift is going to happen. There's actually a book written about this. It's called The Structure of Science. And in the book, it says there's normal science, that's science that's within the paradigm. And then there's a paradigm shift, which changes science. And then there's new normal science built on that paradigm, and then a paradigm shift. So like, and these paradigms, like on a time horizon, like they pretty much happen on these like 195-year, like these things happen like that. So, you know, looking back 95 years and then trying to project into the future 95 years, it should give you a nice blueprint of how like you should be trying to project like what the outcome is going to be. And unless like there's some crazy plague or like a crazy solar flare or AI destroys our ability to continue to progress and we go back to the Stone Age, like my assumption is we're going to have more energy, we're going to have more hashes, and if Bitcoin's the denominator, then the economics are going to be wild.
It's I think, why is it so hard for the human brain to comprehend those exponential growth things and this paradigm shifts? Like you probably have gotten a question that.
I don't know. I don't know why I can grok it either. Honestly, like I don't know why for me it seems obvious, and for most people it's like crazy talk. Maybe like not enough people have read Structure of Science. But like again, like being stuck in normal science versus the structure of a paradigm, like it's very logical to like be in a paradigm and build on that paradigm. Like think of like, okay, you grow up, you get an education, you go follow a specific career, like all of that is built on like one way the world works. It is very hard to, you know, like if you were to like be a kid and your parents were to give you advice on what to do, they'd say be an engineer, be a doctor, be a lawyer, because these are the ways that you can ensure you're going to have wealth in the way that the world works today. It's very difficult for them, you know, to go to a kid and be like, do something crazy, you know, go all in on this type of a thing, because that requires like the vision of where the world is going. And that's just not really like how humanity works. And also the world doesn't shift all the time. Most of the time it's kind of like, here's an existing paradigm. So the incentive is for people to be within the paradigm. That is like how we all kind of operate.
What do you think are the craziest implications of that paradigm shift that you can think of now?
So my boss, Alex Gladstein, he has this concept where he calls Bitcoin a Trojan horse for freedom. So the concept is that dictators and purely economic actors are going to adopt Bitcoin because of financial reasons, out of wanting to have a gain. And there's going to be like the unintended side consequence of like everyone who's around that is going to become more free and more sovereign and more able to control their wealth and control their destiny. So I firmly believe in that. I think that Bitcoin really aligns incentives on that. Is, you know, you will adopt it for the gains, and you know you will become more free and be happy because of it. So like, how is that going to change what the world looks like? I really like the book, The Sovereign Individual. I read it back in 2019, before COVID. And I feel like that is a really first principles book that is very directly correct on how it's predicting the future. And I love the books that are like relevant to Bitcoin that were written before Bitcoin. So Sovereign Individual is one of these books, published in 1997. It predicts COVID lockdowns. It predicts digital hard currency outside the reach of the state. Now we know that as Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. It predicts the economy moving online, when that prediction was a crazy idea back in the 90s. And, you know, if it was published in 97, that means it was written before 97, which means that they were thinking about it, you know, in the early 90s or before. So these people were very, very forward thinking. Lord Rees-Mogg and I forget the other guy's name. One second, I'm going to look right now. I got a copy of it right here. But yeah, James Dale Davidson and Lord William Rees-Mogg.
Not easy to remember.
Yeah, so like they were very, very directly correct on where this is going, and they predict that, you know, people are going to have more sovereignty. They predict that there's going to be 100 million sovereign individuals. So that's bullish. Well, there's only 21 million Bitcoin, but these sovereign individuals are going to like have sovereignty over themselves. Like no entity will be above them in terms of their ability to control their future. And they also predict that the map is going to break down into smaller jurisdictions, and those jurisdictions will be competitive with each other. So like, hey, you're an Austrian, I'm American. That's not very competitive. It's hard for me to change jurisdictions. It's hard for me to take my assets, my identity, my credentials with me. They predict all that goes away, and there's going to be heavy jurisdictional competition, and that people will have a lot of choice which jurisdiction they want to be in, and that is going to create better outcomes for people. So, I mean, I think that they're probably going to be right. I see that happening. Not all of their predictions are correct, but I definitely think it's a really good framework to try to think through, like, what does the digital revolution look like?
Let's take a break for a moment and appreciate the beauty that Coin Vigilante has made with the Bitcoin watches. Those watches are the most amazing, the most elegant way of showing that you are a true Bitcoiner. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. And now, if you have Bitcoin, I really do hope that you don't have it on exchange. But if you do have it on exchange, I have two ways for you to deal with that. The first way is you put it on a hardware wallet. That's the entry for you to get into the self-custody game. I recommend BitBox, Bitcoin only edition, for that. It's a super simple and secure way. And if you check out the link in the description, you even get 5% off if you use the code Robin. And the second way is the Bitcoin Way. The Bitcoin Way is your all-in partner in terms of how to get the most out of your sovereignty. They will personalize for you a self-custody setup that is perfect for your individual situation. They will show you how you can secure your own devices. Securing your Bitcoin is not enough. You also have to keep all your devices secure. One topic that is overlooked often is the inheritance plan. What happens with your Bitcoin once you are no longer here? Do you have a plan for that in place already? And last but not least, if you're in the jurisdictions where you don't feel safe, it's better to get a plan B. For all that, head over to thebitcoinway.com/Robin to get a 30-minute free call. And just a quick side note, I will be for the first time ever speaking at the Bitcoin Prague event in June. It will be absolutely legendary, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you there. You can get your ticket in the link down in the description of Bitcoin Prague, and very important, use code Robin to get 10% off your ticket. I'm really looking forward seeing you there. It always amazes me when I think now like BlackRock and America are adopting Bitcoin, and that's the very thing that will kind of rip away their power that they once have. It's interesting to think about that.
Yeah, the Trojan horse for freedom, man. It's a good thesis by Gladstein for sure.
Absolutely. You mentioned also Jeff Bouvan, and there's one thing that I'm curious how you think about that. He said in the last podcast I did with him, the second round, was if Bitcoin fails as a medium of exchange, it will also fail as a store of value. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, look, I think that like is Bitcoin a medium exchange, unit of account, these kind of things, like is Bitcoin an asset conversation. So if we have an idea of like, is Bitcoin just another asset? Like, where can it fail? Then yeah, I agree that like if Bitcoin stays as a financialized asset that's just a savings vehicle, it is unclear how it will continue to compete into the future. But that's not my base case. My base case is that Bitcoin is a paradigm shift, and like concerns around like, is Bitcoin a medium exchange? Is Bitcoin going to be a unit of account? Like these concerns are really just a symptom of us being in the extreme early adopter phase of this paradigm shift. So like, I'm not that concerned. I would say it's better to hedge the possibility that Bitcoin is just an asset or that Bitcoin is going to fail than it is to like worry about it, right? Just hedge, right? Like either Bitcoin's going to succeed or it's probably going to fail. So like you probably need some guns and bullion and a couple of like extra passports and some other considerations in that future. Like it's yes, I'm sure there are things that we can do to advance Bitcoin to ensure that it succeeds, right? But those incentives exist everywhere. There's 8 billion people on the planet. So those incentives aren't just you. Although, obviously you can be the change you want to see in the world, but everyone can be the change they want to see in the world with Bitcoin. Like that's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin. So I think like if Bitcoin truly is a paradigm shift, like these things aren't issues per se.
So you look for the base case of Bitcoin even beyond money, because like mean of exchange, unit of account, store of value, there's like the attributes of money. So your base case is basically even beyond it being the money of our society.
I would say like it's impossible for there to be hyper Bitcoinization and for us to think in fiat still, right? And like isn't that Jeff Booth's thesis is that we have exponential technologically enabled what's it called? Not inflation, but disinflation or deflation, right? So technologically, exponential deflation created by our gains in efficiency. We need money that maps to that, right? So like, I think that Bitcoin literally maps to the world better. Like a great saying that I love is by a thinker in Bitcoin, an OG. His name is Nolan Bowerly. On Twitter, Count BTC, someone who you should definitely interview. He's a genius. But his whole his handle Count BTC is based on this idea is like Bitcoin is money you can count. Like how many dollars are there, Robin? Not even Jerome Powell knows. So the high priests of fiat don't know how many dollars there are. I can tell you, anyone can tell you how many Bitcoin there are. Bitcoin is money you can count. It's already exponentially better. So yeah, I think it's going to be a unit of account because you can count it, dude. Like the other things you can't count, like the high priests of fiat don't understand it. Like, yes, I think Bitcoin is going to disrupt the religion of fiat. I think that the thing that is built off of nothingness and violence is going to be disrupted by math and science. That's not that crazy. I don't think it's that crazy. I actually think like this is the logical way to look at it. Like looking at it like, is the unit of account going to work? That's so dumb. Buy a gun, buy some swords, learn Krav Maga. Like if you don't think unit of account is going to work, like figure out another solution, don't worry about it. Like either Bitcoin's going to work or you're going to need to find another solution. But like some effort we take is not going to change the destination of Bitcoin.
I love that. And by the way, maybe I just searched it for the people that are wondering. I had Nolan on my show recently, actually, just 2 weeks ago. That's it for
Nolan's
people.
The man.
It was a really nice episode. I loved it a lot. So that's for people wondering, they can just go there. It's really interesting. I love talking with you, man. I always say, as long as we can still buy Bitcoin, because I get that a lot. Like, are we still early to Bitcoin? Aren't we late? And I always say, and I'm curious how you think about that. As long as we can still buy Bitcoin with fiat, we are early. Like as long as Bitcoin still has a fiat price, because there's still fiat around, I think we are kind of sense early. How do you look at that?
Yeah, totally agree. I would say like nothing is a tell that someone has a fiat mindset or someone has Bitcoin as an asset mindset than them saying something like, oh, we've crossed the paradigm already. What that shows to me is they confuse brand recognition of Bitcoin because Bitcoin is a household name already, but they confuse that with adoption. But if you actually like count adoption by any way that you can measure it, like we're less than 0.01% global adoption of Bitcoin. The metric I like to think about it is how many people have taken self-custody or can take self-custody and then abstain, right? I think like it is logical that you are capable of taking self-custody, but you want to use a bank. That's fine, but you can take self-custody. But if you have a Coinbase account and you think that's the same as Bitcoin, like that's not adoption. That's not custody. So that's the way I like to like measure adoption. I think that we're at less than 0.0001% adoption. I think like, you know, less than a million people on the planet probably are like using this thing in like any capacity that is going to look like the way it's going to work natively in the future. And there's 8 billion people on the planet. So you do the math. Like you can divide those things. We're not like, if you look at any of these like S curve of adoption or bell curve of adoption, crossing the chasm is like 12% adoption, 15% adoption, 20% adoption. We're at less than 0.001% adoption. So like, how are we crossing the chasm and how are we late? So yeah, you could say if you can buy with fiat, you're early. That's probably a pretty reasonable way to like think about how early we are. But yeah, I think that when we get to the point where there's more liquidity in the Bitcoin system than the fiat system, that is the inflection point. That's where we go from early majority to late majority. And, where the gains stop being so outsized. But until then, I think that there's going to be more volatility and that we're so early. And this thing is, this train is just about to get started.
I love that. And I hate that when people say, oh, we are at 3 or 4% adoption. And I'm like, do you count someone that has $1,000 on Coinbase as someone that like is adopted now? Like that does not make sense. That's a
They're
weird
confused.
thing.
Like, look, if they can be like, I'm putting in Coinbase because I don't trust myself. I tried self-custody, but really I just have too much wealth and I feel more comfortable with Coinbase and I locked down my account. Okay, I count that. But if it's like, oh, my mom has Bitcoin on her Coinbase app without two-factor authentication and, she's looking at the dollar price and, waiting when should I sell it? Like, that's not adoption yet. That's just early speculation. And there's 8 billion people on the planet. That's like the key here. Like we're nowhere close to 800 million of them like adopting Bitcoin. I don't think we're anywhere close to that.
How many people do you think understood Bitcoin on a quite deep level?
A very small community, man. But I will tell you, HRF is with the Reynolds Foundation is working with an amazing scholar. Her name is Seyr. She's a professor at Cornell to do surveying of Bitcoin and crypto users in authoritarian countries. And they're doing, really like legitimate polling using a polling agency. And they're doing like statistically relevant research on adoption. And one of the really, really interesting things that, they started sending to me is that the people who are adopting Bitcoin and stable coins right now in Africa and different places that struggle with the problems of fiat a lot more than people in the West do, they're very ideologically aligned, which is surprising because you'd be like, oh, Bitcoin is money, therefore they're just going to use it because it works. But they're actually doing it because they understand the problem and they understand the solution. So I think like that is actually another tell that we're super, super early, because I think that in the future, if we've crossed the chasm, those users won't be ideologically aligned. Those users are actually going to just use it because it's more convenient. They're going to use it because this is the best way to send money to their friends, not because fiat is broken and this is my safe haven. This is the only way not to get inflated in my country. That is ideological alignment. So I still think we're in the very early adopter stage where the technology is used by people who deeply understand it. So all the users for right now, like, are really, really in touch, are on the cutting edge, or they're on the cutting edge of their community and they're helping their community. That's how I think Bitcoin is being used right now.
I have a Twitter list where I'm trying to figure out all the Bitcoiners on Twitter and just like put them in a list to keep count of that. And there are currently, I think, like 700 or 800 in there, and I'm trying to get through that. So I'm always thinking like, okay, if there's like, let's say 1,000 people that are known to be Bitcoiners that are kind of good in explaining it and have a kind of deep understanding. Of course, there are different levels to that. Then can there be more than like 100,000 people that actually understood Bitcoin? It's really, it's really fun for me to think about the small number of people who actually understood Bitcoin. Because if you go now on the street and just ask 1,000 random strangers, I don't know how many Bitcoiners you get there who actually understand. If you can ask them 10 questions about Bitcoin, like 900 of them will not even be able to answer like 2 questions, let alone like all 10 in a deep way, like basic ones. Like what's the average block time? Like most people like block time. What is block time?
And look, I don't think that people will become more Bitcoin literate as it becomes more relevant for them, but not beyond the amount that they need to know to use the technology. And if our UX improves the way that it should, the way that it needs to for competition, it's not going to be very much, right? And a lot of Bitcoiners will say, "Well, that's a bad thing. People need to learn and take responsibility." I agree, but we already know that the world is going to be full of AI generated scams. So like, you either get scammed or you survive. Like that's just the future. So like, people will learn responsibility because AI generated intelligent scams are going to be like that's going to be the basis. That's going to be the baseline. And honestly, like, one of Nolan's predictions is that all of us are going to have AI assisted, but we're going to have AI buddies that are like our, children and best friends. And it's going to help us navigate the world of AI generated sludge and truth and fiction and all this kind of stuff. Maybe it'll even help us manage our keys. So I think we're very early in even understanding, key management and what that looks like in the future. But just to kind of like add one more point to how early we are. We both agree we're very early, but just to emphasize that we are that early. There's only like 700 Bitcoiners on your list or whatever, but none of them are bullish enough. So even the Bitcoiners that we have aren't bullish enough. So that's how early we are.
I love that. And by the way, I already have a bit AI buddy. I talk with 1, 2, 3 AIs like almost every day with the voice mode. It feels like an assistant, a friend, and parent, like whatever you want to call it in different situations. I talk on days more with AI as with any other human being. It might not be healthy, but I do learn a lot from that.
I mean, that's impressive. I would say I am heavily adopting AI and LLMs into my workflow, but I don't talk to them as more than humans yet.
Yeah, I'm crazy. Sorry. Maybe one last topic for the day I want to get in with you. Obviously, is what Bitcoin is doing for human rights. I mean, like you probably get that question a lot, but I think it's a really interesting one, which actually isn't talked as much as it should be on podcasts. We talk a lot about price, why we're not bullish enough and stuff like that. But like the human rights aspect is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I came for the number go up and to be early on something, and I stayed for the freedoms, the human rights, the sovereignty, and the reality is. There's this thing called the golden billion. So the golden billion is the 1 billion people on earth who live in a democracy, who have stable fiat and assets that they can get exposure to, and relatively secure property rights, right? 8 billion people on the planet, 1 billion people have that. So that means 7 billion people in the current system are required to not have that so that the 1 billion that have it can have it. And you could say, oh, well, it's not like that. It's not that clean. It's not that direct. I think it is. It's pretty clear that the fiat dollar system requires that there is harvesting of natural resources in the vast majority of the planet, the global majority, 7 billion people, the majority of the south of the planet, a lot of the eastern part of the planet, not in the west sphere, so that the 1 billion people can have their globalization and have their fiat and have their property and have their assets. And that sucks. That's a waste of human potential. Do you truly think that the minds of and the hearts and the muscles of someone born somewhere different that aren't part of the golden billion are any less human or any less capable of producing wealth and prosperity than the people living in the golden billion? I mean, we know that that's not true because people immigrate into the West and find amazing success. Like that's the story of my family. My family immigrated from Egypt. If they didn't immigrate from Egypt, I would not be on this phone call with you. I would not be the director of financial freedom at the Human Rights Foundation. I would not have a tenth of the wealth that I have today. I would actually be suffering through hyperinflation. That's reality. That's how the fiat works. So like if we can build a system that does not require that has equal access to all 8 billion people, and I know that that's hard to say. Like, okay, fine. We have 5 billion people who have internet access. What if we can get those 5 billion to have property rights, assets, and sound money? What if we could do that? What are the implications for humanity there? Both in like the feel good, they have rights, they have property, they have control of their life, but in the prosperity and wealth for people and living standards for people, what are the implications of that? I think it's just math. If we can stop wasting the lives inefficiently of an additional 4 billion people on the planet and make them productive and give them access to wealth and let them live out their full capabilities and dignity, that would create an amazing future for humanity. I think that you need money like Bitcoin in order to do that. What's my proof? Well, we've had money not like Bitcoin for the past 35 years, and we've seen what it produces. 1 billion people have it, 7 billion people don't. These are facts. So, I think that Bitcoin's good for humanity because, if you want to resist a dictator, what's the first thing they do? Shut off your bank account. What's the next thing they do? They shut off your voice on social media, on the internet. Well, if you don't have digital access of payments and voice, well, you're really severed in your ability to create change in the 21st century. That's what HRF is embracing technology and trying to help people who want to bring property rights, choice, democracy, give them the tools to resist and be sovereign and to have a chance at creating that future. Again, I'm bullish. And I think that if you go back to the idea of the sovereign individual, nothing creates more choice for people, more opportunity for people than jurisdictional competition and the ability to own your wealth and move it across borders. I remember, this might sound like a crazy tangent, but I was in Cambodia talking to an English expat, this like old 50-year-old guy who's there living cheap, has a couple girlfriends, all this kind of stuff. And he loved gold. He was like one of those types. He's like, I love gold. Gold's amazing. That when the Jews were escaping Germany, they would sew gold into their pants so that way they could take their wealth with them. And I was like, that's great. Bitcoin, you can just memorize the seed phrase and then leave with it. Bitcoin's information, like from a wealth transportation perspective, like it is a massive upgrade on what was possible before, what was possible without trust in your own custody. Like it's a complete game changer. So like, what does that mean for all the refugee crises across the world if people can all of a sudden, for the first time in history, take their wealth with them, right? Like, what does that mean? It means everything. It means absolutely everything. Because, in the past, if, you had to leave where you lived, you left your wealth. You had to start over. Like the game changer that is Bitcoin, that is money that you can continue to custody with you in digital form and information form across borders by itself is a massive, massive game changer with massive, massive implications. And that's not even, scratching the surface of all the use cases for the humanitarian industry today, the activism space today, as well as like the future as these tools continue to get adopted. So this is why I love Gladstein's perspective is Bitcoin is actually a Trojan horse for freedom, right? People adopt it because number go up, especially dictators. And what really happens is that freedom goes up.
I love that. And you probably have seen a lot of the real world examples of the meme, fix the money, fix the world. You probably have seen the actual implications of that Twitter meme.
Yeah. I mean, look, one of the things that HRF and Alex Gladstein and our team is doing better than anyone else, I think, is telling those stories. Telling the stories of Bitcoin as a tool for freedom, Bitcoin as universal property rights, Bitcoin as universal access to sound money and sound investments. Like, what people don't get is, like, if you live in a place like Palestine, okay, one, if you live in Gaza, like, you're in the war conditions, but before then, you didn't have any assets. The only asset that you could really invest in is real estate. Well, what happened to that? Well, it's not really an asset anymore, unfortunately. And like, that's a sad example, but I think it really shows like you can have sound assets that are not, that can't be bombed necessarily. And you can take with you, like, it's so massive. And the majority of the planet does not have that. And even in the West, the privileged West, we don't have it to the extent that Bitcoin gives to everyone. Right, with our all of the things that are afforded to us by the golden billions privilege, we don't even get the full level of sovereignty and wealth preservation that Bitcoin offers to every single person that is connected to the internet, that has access to the open Bitcoin network. Like, it's just like, no one is bullish enough on the prospect of this thing being the thing. Right, this thing turning into the base layer. Not even me. Like, I can't grok it. I'm not a genius. I'm not Nikola Tesla. I'm just some idiot that actually is making this observation that, like, oh, if this is a paradigm shift, like, these are the things to expect. That's it. That's all I'm doing.
And yeah, as you said, because most listeners here probably are from this 1 billion of the golden. How you said golden.
The golden billion. The
golden billion, yeah. And even those who live, like, let's say, in a good city, in a good country, with like a stable democracy, with a stable currency, kind of stable democracy, kind of stable currency, even those have to pay property taxes on on their real estate. Even those don't really own their real estate; they just own it as long as the government lets them own this thing. So it's really interesting to see, even in the highest order of property rights, even their property rights aren't really there outside of Bitcoin. I think that's a major thing. And then you look outside of that 1 golden billion, of the other 7 billion, and you're like, oh, like, it's like 100x worse.
Again, like, I can imagine very easily where my life would be if my parents did not leave Egypt. I went to Egypt last summer. Like, it does not matter how good of a business person you are. It does not matter how intelligent you are. It does not matter, because you're living in a system that's breaking down. Like, you are being held down. And I would not be where I'm at if I didn't have, like, the foundation that is afforded to me here in the West. It has nothing to do with my ability. What if Bitcoin can spread that to another 4 billion people, another 7 billion people potentially? That's the ultimate TAM. Like, what are the implications for that? I mean, that's a really beautiful thing to fight for, in my opinion.
100%. I agree with you here. We have 2 questions at the end of the podcast. The first question is always the same question. And the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Oh, man. Wait, so what was the first question?
What we can learn from you besides Bitcoin? That's the first question.
So I would say, like, I love Bitcoin. I'm passionate about Bitcoin. My real skill set is like dealing with people and management and that kind of stuff, and organization. So, maybe in the future I'll write a book about that. But for now, yeah, I think, Bitcoin's my forte, and, just hoping to spread more of these ideas. I think there's a book in the making in terms of how to think about Bitcoin, how to think about paradigm shift, etc. So yeah, that's the Bitcoin and non-Bitcoin part.
I'm looking forward to that one. And we have a very nice end routine where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And it fits nicely. What's the name of the last book you read, and why did you read it?
Yeah, the last book I read was The Structure of Science. And I was trying to develop the idea of, Bitcoin as a paradigm shift, and I was telling someone about it at a retreat that HRF was putting on, and she was like, "Oh, there's a book written about that, Structure of Science. Look it up." And then I immediately bought it and read it, and it has enriched my perspective a lot.
Really cool. Awesome. Really cool. Thank you so much, CK, for being on. Before I let you go, where can people find you, reach out to you, and see all your stuff?
So I'm on X, but I deleted my X from my phone, so I to rate limit my usage. But I'm at CK_snarks on X, and then I am on Nostr and trying to help bootstrap that network. That is like a key-based open source social network that Bitcoiners are building, and it's very promising and has a lot of viral developer activity. And you can find me there at primal.net/CK.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time, CK. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.